we are dealing with an area of the law that's highly complex. And then we're dealing with a time and an administration that has, as Dr. Kazemi mentioned, is changing on a rapid basis and is breaking all the norms. So if you don't fully appreciate where we started and how we are here, I think it's going to be harder for you to sort of appreciate where we're going from here. So my hope was to start a little bit about what the immigration world looked like, frankly, pre 9/11, because I think we have gone in terms of a historical evolution through a couple of big changes, and 9/11 was a very, very defining moment for the country. Before 9/11, all immigration-related matters were pretty much, the domestic ones were pretty much housed within the Department of Justice. A lot of you may have heard of INS, or former Immigration Nationalization Service. INS was within the Department of Justice. It was the enforcement. It dealt with some of the work that USCIS currently is doing. And the Immigration Court was also within the Department of Justice. We also have other players like the State Department that Dr. Kazemi talked about. State Department is involved with visa matters or immigration matters for people overseas, but for the most domestic stuff, it was all pretty much within DOJ. After 9/11, there was a real shift and things changed in terms of I think the country's view towards immigration. I think it was the first big step in really starting to vilify at least certain sector of the immigrant population. And we started seeing a major focus on sort of Homeland Security, and hence the birth of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. At the time, the various roles that INS was playing was divided up into 3 separate agencies, all within the Department of Homeland Security. CBP, ICE, and USCIS. So what you're probably hearing oftentimes right now is if anybody is at the border or maybe within 100 miles of the border, you're generally dealing with Customs and Border Protection. That became the border protection arm of the Department of Homeland Security. The interior enforcement, which a lot you've been hearing about, the interior arrests, are generally led by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And then the benefits arm, which Mariam has talked about and which globally I think has been focused on, it deals with people who are trying to navigate the immigration system in the lawful manner in terms of the legal framework that the legislators have provided, all the different non-immigrant visas, immigrant visas. USCIS is the agency that is now tasked with processing those benefit requests. When DHS was created, the reason the 3 agencies were separated, it was an understanding that they have distinct missions. They're really dealing, one is much more enforcement at the border, the other one is enforcement interior, and USCIS is benefits related. What has changed now in the last few months is that basically USCIS has also been transformed and turned into an enforcement arm of DHS. So everything within USCIS is also being fully focused on not just vetting, but also working with the other arms of DHS agencies for enforcement. And I think that's important for everyone to be aware of, because a lot of the privacy protections that existed before for people sharing their information with USCIS in large part has dissipated. There is really no expectation of privacy of information. So you really need to be aware of that as you engage. So separate from that is the immigration court system, which has always had the challenge of being within the Department of Justice. Now, traditionally, the Department of Justice had extended a certain level of protection to the immigration court, recognizing that as basically a judicially modeled court, it shouldn't be influenced by the enforcement policies of the administration. But, as a former immigration judge for 15 years, as the past president of the Immigration Judges Union, we have always been raising the flag that a court system that is housed within a law enforcement agency is going to have tension. There's going to be conflict. And because of that, we have always raised concerns about how the court may sometimes be utilized inconsistent with judicial philosophies of an independent judge and independent court system. Unfortunately, we are now at an era where all of those alarms have born to be true. What we're seeing now is that the administration has utilized the immigration court as also another enforcement arm of the executive branch. So I think that's the one goal or one point that I wanted to highlight in terms of the major change that I think everybody has been seeing on headlines and the news. So it's certainly nothing new per se, but I did want to sort of note that this is really the first time we're seeing the type of alignment of all of these different agencies that were designed to act somewhat independent of one another in concert with one another. So that's going to be very important. I know the goal of the panel has been to focus a little bit more on USCIS. So I thought at this time, I'll talk to you a little bit more about sort of the lawful immigration process in terms of what you should keep in mind. So USCIS is unusual in terms of a government agency because over 95% of the funding for the agency is through the fees that it collects. Most government agencies are funded by Congress, but USCIS is funded by the application fees that the applicants or the employers or the petitioners file for purposes of securing the benefits that they are asking for. So that gives it a unique role. It is an agency that processes. When I was there, as it was mentioned, I served as a Biden-Harris appointee as the head of the legal department for the agency. The agency at that time by the time we left, had 23,000 employees, and we processed over 13 million applications. So again, that gives you a little view of just the magnitude of the types of application and the volume of the applicants. And that's why a lot of it, the focus on the complexity, the focus on needing to know exactly what type of application to file, the level of evidence that you need, and the amount of scrutiny that it's going to get is going to be very important for you to keep in mind. USCIS does try to provide information, or has traditionally tried to provide information in terms of what are called the policy manual. So you can go online and get some information about the specific requirements of any particular question that you have. But it's not complete, and it's really, it's the public-facing part of the agency. And you're still going to be required to be responsible to know the law, to know the regulations, and to know all the additional requirements that an application might have. But as an agency, it does, it does process dozens and dozens of different types of application. It collects billions of dollars in fees every year. It has unfortunately now it has dissipated from 23,000, I understand, down to 20,000. And now a lot of the information that's being gathered, it's being used for extreme vetting. So I know Dr. Kazemi talked about the social media account information that's being asked. That is now being much more widely required. There's all this focus on very detailed review of the person's past. Biometrics checks, everyone pretty much is going to be required to provide their fingerprints, show up for an appointment, physical appointment, in-person appointment, to show up and provide their biometrics information, sort of facial recognition, fingerprints, all the biographical information. And that database goes into a vast, vast vetting network that is quite onerous and oftentimes can take a long. It's both automated and manual. And as we've seen, because of both the pressure to cut employees and push employees out, and because of the extreme focus on enforcement, and because of doubling down on vetting, we've seen a major, major increase in backlog of cases. So I think as you consider all of these, you really want to be aware of not just the complexity, not just attention to detail, the risks of potentially mistakes, but also the fact that a lot of the applications can take a very, very long time, and you may need to have some sort of expert counsel that'll help you navigate through this. Oftentimes, it may require litigation and having to sort of formally file a lawsuit to get the agency to process an application properly. But all is not lost. While there is a lot of focus on vetting and there has been extreme vilification of the immigrant community, and it is true that every day we hear more and more onerous requirements and rules and focus on the immigrant community. Nevertheless, there is still the statutory provisions are still there. The regulations are still there, and there is still a requirement for the agency to process those applications and for those people who meet the requirement to provide that benefit. So if you are adequately informed, if you're adequately prepared, and you have adequate support, then that you should have an opportunity, and you should be able to pursue those applications and hopefully succeed on them. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Professor Nia, and welcome the next session of the program.
Thank you so much, Judge. It was very, very informative, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions to be asked. I'd like to next introduce